The problem is we're going to find out in Canada that things are a lot worse than we thought, because I'm sure that Trudeau is so spectacularly incompetent that there's endless discoveries of corruption and idiocy to be unveiled. And I'm afraid for Pierre Poilievre that he's going to be left with a terrible mess.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we got a bit of a mixed bag of things that happened over the weekend. As you saw from the opener, Jordan Peterson sat down with his daughter Michaela. They talked about Canada, Trudeau, Toronto, the state of things. We have Vashi Capellos and her Sunday strategy team talking about the fall economic statement. We'll maybe see a little bit of Freeland there as well, unfortunately. But I want to start off with some new numbers that came out from the Nanos polling. This is Nick Nanos on CTV, and he kind of sheds a bit of light of where the parties are sitting at right now.
Time now to take the pulse of the country's political heartbeat. Nick Nanos is here to help us do that. He is the founder and chief data scientist at Nanos Research. Nick, thanks as always for joining us.
Good to see you, Roger.
And are the people happy today? Who are the happiest ones in Ottawa right now? Is the Conservatives still holding on to the top spot, Poilievre?
Yeah, I was interested in hearing you refer to this as a heartbeat. You know, I think if you're the Liberals, you might be clutching your chest.
Looking for a pulse.
You're looking for a pulse? That's pretty harsh, but you're correct. Roger, so, you know, we look at the latest Nanos tracking, and, you know, what's interesting is that, you know, we always talked in the past about the Liberals kind of trying to change the trend line. The latest thing has been this $250 proposed check and the tax holiday. Well, you know, you can see Liberal numbers aren't up. That's for sure. They're, you know, basically 19 points back. The Conservatives at 42, up 2 points.
Wow. In
the 4-week rolling average. The Liberals at 23, down 1, but within the margin of error. No change for the NDP. So, Roger, if you're Jagmeet Singh, you're thinking, okay, so I'm supporting this GST, HST tax holiday. No bump for Jagmeet Singh so far. Roger, why don't we just say Liberals have thrown another kitchen sink to try to change the trend line, and not working, at least not working yet.
No, a lot of people I've talked to about that, especially business people. The whole GST thing is going to be a nightmare for them and cost them money. So, yeah, not surprising that a lot of people are happy with that. Okay, tariffs. Do we have a concern for it? I imagine a lot of people do.
Yeah, you know, the thing is in a survey that we just did for CTV News for Power Play, Vashi's show, we asked Canadians about this 25% tariff that Trump has alleged say that he would do once he was president. And check it out, Roger, 23% of Canadians or thereabouts believe that it's likely that these Canadians believe that it's likely this will happen. Another 40% say that it's somewhat likely. So, you know what, Roger? Let's set aside what the experts and diplomats and everybody else says in terms of the tariffs. There's a significant proportion of Canadians that are basically buckling up and believe that there is a possibility that tariffs might be slapped on Canada under a Trump administration.
Now, in all honesty, those numbers are not surprising. I'm sure Justin was hoping for a bit of a boost, but to no avail. However, I am surprised that only 60% of people think that Trump will put these tariffs on. This guy, I don't think, really messes around. And even the CBC followed up on an NBC interview that Trump had, where a former deputy of the Homeland Security came out and said, when Trump says something, he means it.
But those who know him say he's dead serious about tariffs.
I think one of the things that people around the world know about Donald Trump is that he will follow through with things like this.
And this actually ties back to about, I think, a month ago, just before the U.S. election, when Nick Nanos came on the air and said this, saying that a lot more people have confidence in Trudeau because he's dealt with Trump before.
Yeah, well, we wanted to go back, a survey that we did with CTV News ahead of the election, asking Canadians who they trusted most to deal with the outcome, whatever that might be. And, you know, what we saw, that Justin Trudeau actually nudged out ahead of Pierre Poilievre, 38-31. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he has dealt with Donald Trump in the past.
Mm-hmm. So you heard that. However, according to a new poll that came out a few days ago, Canadians agree with Trump on the border, lack of confidence in Trudeau on the tariffs. The lack of confidence was prevalent across the country in rural and urban areas in every age group and among both men and women. Again, like I said, this was posted 2 days ago. If you scroll down here, it does mention how big it is. It was about a sample size of 1,500 individuals. And when we look at this top part here, it says, but voters are very worried about the impact of Trump's tariffs, the poll found. 8 in 10 Canadians, about 80%, said that they're concerned that they will lead to higher inflation in Canada. A similar number, still around 80%, said that they think the tariffs will increase the likelihood of a recession. And all of this information here does tie back into the fall economic statement that we're all waiting for, as Vashi and the Sunday strategy team get into that a little bit here.
The feds have yet to table their fall economic statement, a mini budget of sorts that acts as an update on the state of the country's finances. Whether and when they will has been the question of the week on the Hill, leading to some heated exchanges between the Liberals and the Tories.
Not only will we cooperate to let her introduce that fall update, we will actually give her a Christmas gift. We'll give her 2 hours out of our Conservative opposition motion day on Monday for her to stand on her feet and tell us how much she's lost control of the nation's finances.
This proposal from the Conservatives is like an arsonist who set the fire in the first place, saying, don't worry about it. I'll come with a fire truck for a couple of hours, but tomorrow I'll be back again with matches.
While a senior government source says it's coming before the House rises, Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland has so far refused to confirm a date.
Now, before we get into Vashi and the panel, if you've been keeping up with the question period at all this week, this is what the Conservatives kept grilling Freeland and the Liberals on. They kept saying, if you don't even want to release the full statement, just let us know what the deficit is. What is the number? And either Freeland chose never to answer or another Liberal member would answer in her place. But on Friday, a CBC reporter, surprisingly, asked her about this fall economic statement and the delay of it, and if it was due to the deficit being so big. And check out this cheeky little comeback he had to her response.
Good afternoon, Minister. David Lau with CBC News. My question today is about the fall economic statement. Normally the FES is released in November. It's now December. Is the FES delayed because the deficit is too big? That's my question.
No.
Not too big.
Gotcha, bitch!
Now, she then got grilled a little bit by the other reporters there saying, like, can you give us more of an answer? And she was like, oh, well, sometimes you guys like short answers, which is never the case, although she does like to talk. But now as we move back into the panel, all of them all had really good things to say. And I was surprised by Kathleen Monk, who's usually terrible at answering questions or being on this panel. Her first round of answer to the question was pretty good. The second one, not so much, but let's take a look at a little bit at that.
Scott, I'll start with you. Is it a big deal, one way or the other, if this document actually makes it into the public view?
It's coming. It's like Christmas or the colonization of Mars. It's coming. You can't stop it. Just don't know when exactly. Look, 20 points behind in the polls. Donald Trump's threatening to annex the country and demolish its economy. I do think maybe being a little unfashionably late with the fall economic statement might be the least of their troubles. But, you know, we're going to see it the next couple of days. The challenge is that, you know, it is difficult to imagine what are plausible economic outlooks that you can rely upon, because so much will depend upon the actions of Trump. So I think we're going to see it. I think we're going to see scenarios laid out. If tariffs happen and they're 10 points, if tariffs happen and they're 20, what does that mean? And my guess is they're going to try to use the fall economic statement to shock people a little bit around the tariff issue and say, this is real, this is coming, this is a vital economic crisis in apprehension, because, you know, it could drive us deep into a recession if, in fact, the worst comes to pass. So that's my guess, and I don't think we'll have to wait too much longer.
Corey, do you think that that's what the government will likely do with the document? And why do you think Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre this week was hot on it, right? I'm going to give a Christmas gift to the finance minister and give her a few hours of our time to table this on an opposition day.
Well, it's hard to know exactly what the thinking is behind it, but I could speculate on a few things. I think Scott touched on one of them. Like any economic forecast that you make right now in the face of 25% tariffs is going to be pretty problematic. Like it's hard to imagine that they will have modeled that in any way that is remotely accurate, even if they tried. It's such an unprecedented set of circumstances. You know, we're also seeing unemployment tick up 6.8%, I think, right now.
Now, what Corey just said there is very important because on Friday as well, Global National released a little report that they did on this new increase in the unemployment rates. And it's at 6.8%. But if you ask the Liberal government, they would say that everything's fine. Wages are keeping at pace. We're creating so many new jobs. There are so many hires. Yet in this report, it states that a vast majority of these new positions are government positions. So they get to inflate these numbers because they're just creating more jobs for themselves.
Some more bad news for Canada's economy with the latest job numbers released today. According to Statistics Canada, unemployment saw a surprising jump to 6.8% in November. That drove the loonie down to just shy of its weakest level this year. Mackenzie Gray dives into the new numbers and what they could mean for next week's Bank of Canada interest rate announcement.
It's the latest sign of a slowing economy. Excluding COVID, unemployment hitting its highest level in 8 years.
Canada's gone from pretty strong labor market conditions back in 2022, early 2023, to today where things definitely aren't so great.
But it was a strong month for hiring. Over 50,000 jobs were added, double what analysts expected. But when you look at the details, things are less encouraging. 90% of new hires came from the public sector, and the number of people who lost their job or are looking for work went up by 87,000, bringing the total number of job seekers to 1.5 million nationally.
We have a large population growth happening right now, but the strength of businesses hiring remains.
That growth coming from immigration, which the Liberals are planning to reduce substantially, despite the minister responsible having said it helped keep Canada out of a recession.
That volume is one that on this particular point of time has been very aggressive. It's contributed to keeping us out of a recession.
But the former Bank of Canada governor believes we're already there. In a speech earlier this week, Stephen Poloz said, "I would say we're in a recession. And the only reason it hasn't showed up in the data, according to Poloz, is because we've been swamped with new immigrants who buy the basics in life, and that boosts our consumption enough." An assessment the finance minister disagrees with.
With your government's significant immigration reduction, should Canadians expect that Canada will enter a recession?
No.
The soft labour market likely to lead to further interest rate cuts from the Bank of Canada, with markets predicting an upcoming 50 basis point slash.
The economy has gotten soft enough that it looks like interest rates are higher than they need to be.
The Bank of Canada won't need to wait long to deliver interest rate relief, Carolyn, with their last rate announcement of 2024 scheduled for next Wednesday.
Now, as we return back to the panel and Corey finishes off his answer, he actually attacks Jagmeet Singh here. And when it moves on to Kathleen Monk, she actually agrees with Corey, which is very surprising. And she says she's quite disappointed with her party, especially with the leader of her party.
So, if we're not sliding into a recession anyway, we certainly will be barreling into a recession if we're facing 25% tariffs. Any projections the government makes on revenue or what the economy is going to do are going to be way off. I don't think anyone is that smart that they could model that correctly. And it's talking about really economic bad news, which is something that is going to benefit the Conservatives and not the Liberals. So giving them some time to make those expressions is probably not a bad day for them. But it belies like the larger point. It's only because the other opposition parties are working with the Conservatives that the filibuster continues. So at a certain point, you got to ask the question: are we not, in a de facto non-confidence position? If nothing can happen in the House because all of the opposition parties are united against the government, even though they haven't, defeated the government on a fiscal bill, at what point, is the dysfunction at such a level that you got to go to the polls?
That's an interesting question. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it has been 10 weeks, right? 10 weeks of complete historic obstruction and gridlock. Nothing's getting done in the House. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's foolish that my own party, the New Democrats, have not put closure on the issue to get actually stuff done in the House. Not just for the issues that Scott and Corey just mentioned in terms of the tariff cliff that we're facing with Trump being elected and coming in the new year, but as Corey mentioned too, unemployment's up, growth down. Like, these are all bad economic factors or metrics that the government is facing down. And so I found it extraordinary this week that and it should be noted that the Speaker had to step in to basically ensure that MPs are doing their job, their constitutional job, which is to vote on the supplementary estimate. So it's a really geeky, in the weeds document. But if that doesn't go through, we kind of get to this brinkmanship that Canadians would be familiar with in the US, where they kind of take the government to the edge of not having the money they need to operate. And do we really want to kind of basically replicate that kind of chaos and dysfunction that we see in the States almost, annually, with the government bringing to a standstill because one party or the other, typically U.S. Republicans, kind of grind the House to a halt and refuse to let money flow. And that's what we're facing here. And that's why we're having the vote next week on the supplements that the Speaker had to step in to ensure that happened. The offer that Mr. Poilievre put on the table in terms of the 2 hours isn't needed. The government could table the fall economic update at any point. It could also table the public accounts, which we need to see. It's
also very late, I will say.
It's super late. And it's like we need to see those numbers to see, where we were and how the spending went and what the deficit is.
Now listen, I typically don't agree with anything that Kathleen Monk usually says. However, she made some very solid points. And this actually dovetails a little bit into the interview that Michaela did with her father, Jordan Peterson, where they get into the state of Canada, where it's going, the election next year, the challenges that Pierre Poilievre's going to have. And Jordan kind of diagnoses Justin Trudeau there, talking about how immature he is. So take a look at this.
I was stressed out about you living in downtown Toronto. People knew where you lived. Neighborhood I thought has been uncomfortable since 2016 when there were reporters down the street.
Yeah.
And
I lived in kind of a Champagne socialist neighborhood, and most of the people there have been positively predisposed to be, but a substantial minority have definitely not been. And I'm less popular in my own neighborhood than I am anywhere else in the world, literally. And that's very annoying. And my son, Julian, your brother, as you know, he lived on the street too, which is part of the reason I lived there, right? Because and he also was inclined to move away because it had become uncomfortable. And I didn't ever expect that to be something that happened in Canada, but under Justin and the woke mob, that's definitely something that's happened. And the Toronto District School Board is an absolute disgrace. It's probably the most woke institution in North America, which is really saying something. And the city is basically run by the wife of the last leader of the Socialist Party in Canada.
Now, just a little FYI, if you're not aware of what Jordan's talking about or who he's talking about, the new mayor of Toronto is Olivia Chow, who was the wife of the former leader of the NDP party, Jack Layton. He died in 2011, where then Thomas Mulcair took over until Jagmeet has now become the leader of the NDP. But she is just basically running Toronto into the ground, and that's what he's talking about. But let's jump back into his interview.
People in Toronto are stressed. Hopefully in October, things turn around and things start to right themselves. But if you fly into Toronto after you've been away for a while, it's stressful.
The problem is we're going to find out in Canada that things are a lot worse than we thought, because I'm sure that Trudeau is so spectacularly incompetent that there's endless discoveries of corruption and idiocy to be unveiled. And I'm afraid for Pierre Poilievre that he's going to be left with a terrible mess and will immediately be blamed by the remnants of the legacy media, which he'll also help dispense with, because I think the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation is on the chopping block, which it richly deserves. $1.4 billion in direct subsidy a year, $600 million in government advertising. You go to the CBC YouTube channel and look at the last 50 things they posted, and this includes whole shows like specials that they've made, sitcoms, etc., where they're posting them for free, they all have under 100 views each.
Oof.
Which means that the only people who watched them are the people who made them, and probably not even then. And of course, they disallow comments because CBC is too clueless to understand that if you're going to be successful in the social media world, you have to understand the ecosystems that you're trying to participate in. And comments on YouTube are actually mandatory, not optional.
Now, this claim by Jordan actually piqued my interest, so I decided to go onto the CBC's YouTube page and actually see what he's saying, and he's not lying. Like, they've posted full-on things that they've released on their channel, like for TV, and yeah, a lot of them are in the hundreds of views, and these are just a few little snippets. But when you look at the full 20-minute episodes, 28 views, 29 views, 57 views, 65 views, it doesn't really matter kind of what you go down. This is a trailer, so it has 75,000 views, but like full episodes, a little over 800, a little over 700. This is another trailer. A lot of these things that they've posted, 46 views, a 44-minute show that you can watch for free on YouTube. And all of these things have less than 100 views. This is extremely sad. Another show from CBC that they made, a full 21 minutes, only 30 views. Like, this is actually quite abysmal. And so Peterson, yeah, he knows what he's talking about. And as he continues, he starts talking about Pierre, how much he kind of likes him, supports him. And now he starts driving into Justin, calling him a phony. And he gets into his mental state where he says he's like a 14-year-old, very immature.
Pierre he's got his rough edges and he's got sharp teeth, and someone like that is necessary, but he's also maturing very rapidly into his role. I really like his wife, and he's got an actual family instead of the pretend family that our friend Justin had, and it's not a facade or a lie like Justin's whole life. And so with any luck, next October, Canada will flip hard, and much harder than the United States has. I mean, obviously Trump won a spectacular victory, but it's still about a 50-50 split in the United States. Whereas in Canada, it's going to go 90-10, I think.
You think? I don't know.
Oh, it will in terms of the election results. Oh, I could see a situation easily where the Liberals lose their party status, because you have to have a certain number of seats. You have to win a certain number of ridings, constituencies, to maintain your status as a party. I could easily see that, not the Liberals failing at that and actually not existing as a political party anymore. That'll be Justin Trudeau's legacy.
Well, they've moved so far left, there isn't a political party there.
Well, there's certainly not a socialist political party left.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Now, the NDP, the Socialist Party, will pick up a fair number of the people who are too daft to know that the whole woke mob scene of idiocy is over. And there's, the NDP in Canada has picked up 20% of the population since like 1960. That's unlikely to change. But the Conservatives are going to win an overwhelming victory, and they're actually conservative, God willing. And so, which means in American terms that they're basically classic liberals, by the way, because Canadian Conservatives are centrists by by the standards of any other country.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Anyways, it's a painful thing to watch the country degenerate into fractious poverty as a consequence of nothing other than immaturity, which is like the hallmark of Trudeau. He's so immature. He looks like a 14-year-old. It's no wonder he was like, I learned this when I was a therapist. I learned to look at people to see how old they were psychologically. Like, I could watch my clients while they were telling me stories, especially stories about their past. They would take on the facial expressions of children sometimes when they were talking about past experiences, especially traumatic experiences. And I learned how to see how old people were. And I swear, this is not a personal slur. Trudeau is somewhere between 13 and 15. And that's not good when you're 50. He was at a Taylor Swift concert the other day non-ironically handing out friendship bracelets while Montreal burned. It's not acceptable. But I'm afraid, as a wounded narcissist, that he's going to do plenty of damage. You know, the country doesn't deserve a leader as spectacular as he is, and he's certainly going to show that to everyone in this last year of his rule, because he'll take his revenge. He will take his revenge. He's going to do that with Bill C63, which is the most totalitarian bill I've ever seen.
You think they'll actually pass that?
It's through first reading. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
I think they'll pass it.
Now, by now, you're probably familiar with Bill C63. I've covered this on the channel. I know Northern Perspectives covered it. I believe David from Moose on the Loose has covered it. A few channels have covered it. Let me just say that. But if you're not totally aware, it is the online harms bill or act that they're trying to push forward. Now, Minister Varani just announced that they're splitting the bill, and maybe I'll do a follow-up video to kind of dive a little bit deeper into that. It might be a little bit too long for today. However, essentially, this is a bill where everyone becomes an informant, essentially. And if you find something offensive that maybe I said, or your neighbor says, or your friends say, you could essentially report them because you feel like it's fomenting hate, or that it's hatred, or that it's dangerous. And then the person that you're reporting on either gets fined, they could potentially be house arrested. It's crazy what this bill is implicating. And like I said, it's a little bit too long to get into now at the end of the video, but maybe we'll do a follow-up. But as always, I would love to hear from you guys. Let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.